On the Mizzou football schedule, all the focus has been on the SEC, but what about the non-conference, which sets up Missouri to figure out exactly who it is for the rest of the season? Let's talk about that and more right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. On today's program, it sure looks like the Tigers are looking for a new opponent in 2025. Plus, I don't want to go too far with this, but man, Peyton Marshall, the Missouri basketball freshman, sure checks a lot of boxes early. You know what? Before I start the program, I do want to remind you, today's program is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports calendar starts thinning out, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And speaking of starting, well, I think the start to Missouri's season, the first 4 weeks, well, if you're a season ticket holder, you might not like the setup. I know my mom was going, wait a second, we're going to have more than half of our schedule at home already finished by September 21st. Yes, Mother, you are correct. That's some strong math by you. But seriously, the first 4 weeks of the season, all at Memorial Stadium, Faurot Field, Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, and Vanderbilt. Of course, those final 2 games there, Boston College and Vanderbilt, a couple of Power 5 games there, of course, and intra-conference game between Missouri and Vanderbilt, but obviously 2 games that Missouri very much expected to win here. And obviously Murray State and Buffalo, well, if you lose those, you might as well shut down the entire season. So in terms of actual entertainment and in terms of actually spacing out the season a little bit and actually getting some fall weather, by the way, get ready for some hot football the first 4 weeks of the season in Columbia this season. I understand that it's not the best setup for that. But in terms of Missouri winning a bunch of games this season, well, not only should Missouri pretty easily, hopefully fairly comfortably, right, start 4-0 during that stretch, but not only that, I think it gives Missouri a great opportunity to figure itself out early on really all 3 facets of the game, but particularly offensively and defensively. Now, offensively, of course, the Tigers have almost everything figured out for the most part. We know the offensive line starters are going to be at this point. Almost certainly, it looks like Caden Green's going to be starting at left guard, Marcus Bryant at left tackle. Well, that's all set. The receiver's pretty much set. Brady Cook's your quarterback. The question is really, to me, can we get the intermediate passing game going a little more? Can we get Brett Norfleet, the talented Missouri tight end, involved in the passing game? Of course, what does the running game look like? Just little tweaks here and there that I think gives Missouri a great chance to figure out some things in the first 4 weeks. And quite honestly, I learned something after last season because I think I was as mad, probably the most mad. I don't know if it's maddest or most mad. You tell me, you grammar Nazis out there, but I was incredibly angry after week 2. Probably the most angry I've ever been on this program after week 2 last season because it just felt like the same old conservative Missouri offense that we had seen the previous couple seasons. A little too much dink and not enough chunk for my liking the first couple weeks. Well, obviously Missouri figured it out week 3 against Kansas State. I think that's exactly what Missouri is going to be able to do this season, though, of course, without a prominent non-conference game in week 3. Often the SEC will set you up with an early season conference game as well. None of that happened for Missouri this year. So this is great for the offense. It's even better for the defense, of course, who has 2 new corners to get in there, new edge rushers, new interior linemen, a new free safety, the whole deal. A lot of questions on defense, and of course, Corey Batoon, the new defensive coordinator as well. So I think hopefully these 4 weeks, Missouri will number one, put enough points up offensively to give its defense a little bit of rope. But the good news is, again, these first 4 weeks here, a lot of times you're going to see some sloppier football defensively in particular with poor tackling, just not as physical in training camp and practice in August as it used to be. Obviously, that's good for injuries, maybe not so good for tackling. The point is, hopefully by the time Missouri hits week 4, has that week 5 bye week before heading to its first road game against Texas A&M, hopefully Missouri figures out what team it is by then, and they won't have any big landmine type games where they can slip up. So to me, this is the type of schedule that sets up absolutely perfectly for Missouri, not only in the conference, but in the non-conference to start the season as well. Sure, we season ticket holders would have liked to have seen the home games spread out a little bit more ideally, but I think for the team, this is a perfect setup. By the way, I was reading Bill Conley's SEC previews. His SNP Plus projections have the Tigers 11th in the country and 6th in the SEC right now. So what does that mean? It means hold on to your butts. The Tigers are going to be right there in contention for a playoff bid all season, more than likely. And by the way, that's 6th in the SEC, right where the media had us as well. That's why one reason I didn't get upset really whatsoever about that particular placing and projection, if you will. You know, again, I would have voted Missouri 5th, probably, maybe 4th, certainly ahead of LSU, but whatever, to each his own. If you want to rate LSU ahead of Missouri, I'm certainly not going to lose my mind about that whatsoever. The one thing I would say is that at 11th in SNP Plus, I will point out that, again, this is why I've said Tigers probably need to go 10-2, finish 4th or 5th, I'd say, in the SEC to make the playoff for certain, because at 11th, let's say at 11th and that projection holds and the Tigers hypothetically at the end of this season are 11th in the college football playoff standings. Well, does that mean, or just say an S&P Plus for just to make it more simple here? Does that mean the Tigers are in? Well, not necessarily, because certainly a team that has lower projections than the Tigers could be the ACC champion or the Big 12 champion. And obviously there's going to be a group of 5 team that's going to get an automatic berth, that 12 seed almost certainly as well. So if the Tigers are 9-3, 6th in the SEC, that's still a great season. You're a top 15 type team, probably going to be on the outside looking in of the playoff. And I think those projections are kind of to my point. And again, Tigers go 10-2, I think they're in. There are certainly possible, plausible scenarios, mathematical scenarios where that's not the case. I just think that's really, really unlikely. So, hey, 10 wins or bust to make the playoff. I'm still there. Now, of course, there is one odd and much talked about portion of the non-conference schedule that I haven't mentioned, and that is Missouri traveling to Amherst, Massachusetts to play the UMass Minutemen October 12th. Week 7 of the college football season, Missouri's 6th game sandwiched between homecoming against Auburn and that road game against Texas A&M. So almost a little bit of a bye week there too, although traveling that far in the middle of the season is not necessarily ideal. So guess what? A similar game next season appears Missouri has wiggled its way out of it for 2025. Let's discuss a game that Missouri appears to have bought out for next season coming up in just a little bit. First, though, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With more than 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. For your second listen, why not check out Locked On Ole Miss with Stephen Willis, who's talking about Missouri running back commit Jamarian Morrow on his show yesterday on Friday. What's up with that? Why is he talking about Morrow? The Rebels trying to steal him from the Tigers? Well, find out on Locked On Ole Miss. But you know what? I want to talk about Mizzou, of course, and the Tigers appear to have wiggled their way out of a road game at Miami of Ohio next season. Their official Twitter feed put out their non-conference schedule next year, and the Tigers were not on there, very notably. That's been one of those games, along with, of course, UMass this season. A trip to Northern Illinois also scheduled on the docket for the coming years, and one other semi-strange road game that was a little bit odd on the schedule as well, that you wonder what the upside is if you're a Missouri fan. Now, Eli Drinkwitz a few years ago, Missouri traveled to Boston College, was going, what the heck are we doing up here, basically? Missouri never gets anybody from the great state of Massachusetts, as he famously said. Well, at least Boston College, hey, there's some history there. You get to hang out in Boston. I went up there. I know a lot of other Missouri fans did. Had a good time at Fenway Park and all that good stuff. Amherst, Massachusetts, though, especially after, well, just being in the great state of Massachusetts fairly recently, not nearly as appealing of a road trip. So same thing with Miami of Ohio, just not a lot of upside for your fans, not a lot of upside for the program to make that road trip either. A game you're expected to win. Well, what if it gets a little bit strange on the road? Hopefully you eke out a victory, but again, then the nation is starting to look at you a little bit sideways. So just not a whole lot of upside there. Frankly, all of these games, these sort of mid-major road games, if you will, that were scheduled, I believe, under the Jim Sturk regime, sure seemed like a cost-cutting type measure for Missouri. Of course, for those of you who are unaware, a lot of times, hey, for example, Murray State is coming for a beatdown by an FCS team. Well, they're going to get paid certainly six figures, maybe $1 million to come get these hands, if you will. So that a lot of those programs rely on those games, by the way, to get a huge chunk of their budget for the year. So the point is, if you go on the road, then you don't have to pay that money. Sure, it's a road trip, but maybe it balances out. You actually save some money in the short term. Sure seems like Missouri, though, at the moment, football, look at that North End Zone complex that's coming. Well, they're in spending money, at least when it comes to football right now. By the way, Missouri could be closing in on its 2026 quarterback, Michael Clayton II, with a quick return visit to Columbia here recently. According to Power Mizzou, this is his second time in a couple weeks visiting Columbia. Again, this is all according to Power Mizzou's Twitter feed. So that does sort of lead me to believe that Missouri could be expecting a commitment here from Michael Clayton II. Now, interestingly here, I have to assume Michael Clayton II, or I don't have to assume, I guess, but I have been assuming that the Sanford, Florida product is the son of former Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver Michael Clayton. Sanford is actually pretty close to Orlando, but not terribly far from Tampa, by the way. I don't know. I'm just putting two and two together here, but I have not yet confirmed if indeed Michael Clayton II is the son of Michael Clayton from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in the day. Those of you who play fantasy football will certainly remember that name, but I got a pretty good feeling that that's the case. But regardless, sure seems like Missouri, despite the fact that, of course, Matt Zoller's its 2025 quarterback, hasn't even started his senior year of high school yet. Sure seems like the Tigers are trying to lock down their 26 quarterback sooner rather than later as well. Now, of course, projecting Missouri basketball for 2024-25 is a real challenge for a whole bunch of different reasons. Not only because there's a whole bunch of new faces on the roster, but what do we make of Dennis Gates, to be quite fair, at this point? The first season at Missouri was a dream type season in many ways. A season that came out of nowhere. Kobe Brown takes another step. All the transfer pieces seem to fit together. Demoy Hodge, all that good stuff. Obviously, the DeAndre Golston buzzer beaters. I mean, just so many great things happened in that first season. And yet, last season, of course, the exact opposite, a complete nightmare. Somehow Missouri manages to go 0-19 in the SEC last season. So where do you come down on that? Frankly, whatever your answer is to that question, I think is pretty reasonable at this point in time. I come down here, though. I just refuse to believe that Dennis Gates forgot how to coach in one season. However, if you're going to say, well, he did completely misplay the transfer portal the previous offseason, yeah, he probably did. Or completely, maybe that's a little harsh. But did he in some ways misplay the portal? I think so. But I also think that's a forgivable sin. Frankly, this whole new transfer portal environment where everyone is a de facto free agent each and every offseason, well, this is all new to everyone, I think. I think part of this environment is why Coach Krzyzewski for Duke retired. I think it's why John Calipari has maybe had some trouble here the last few seasons, at least in part wondering, wait, how do I balance this? Because my one-and-done strategy sure seemed like it worked in the old environment, but now I got to adjust to this new environment where everybody seems to have seniors now that I'm playing against. So, there's a whole balance there. Obviously, the previous Arkansas coach, Eric Musselman, ran afoul of some of his bigger NIL donors. So there's that to all get into and everything else. But the point is, back to Missouri. Last season, who knows what exactly went on behind the scenes in terms of, hey, here's the money for this guy, and maybe Dennis Gates wanted to – there's been talk behind the scenes that there were guys that Gates just thought, okay, that's too much for that guy, let's hold it back. Regardless, if you're going to say he maybe misplayed that last offseason, that's probably fair because, for example – Connor Vanover signed with Missouri in June, I believe June 4th, something like that. Well, compare that to Mark Mitchell from Duke, who signed in mid-April out of the portal this previous offseason. The point here is no matter what you think of Connor Vanover, pretty obvious that when Missouri had to basically talk him back into playing college basketball again for a fifth, sixth season, whatever, I believe a fifth season for Connor, he wasn't necessarily planning on coming back and playing college basketball. So when you have to talk that young man into that, he's obviously not your first choice. If he were your first choice, you would have taken him in April and not all the way in June. Notice Missouri wasn't signing guys in June this time around. So I think that Dennis Gates had and the rest of the staff, everybody behind the scenes with Missouri, I just think they had a much better handle on what to do in the portal this offseason, and by all accounts, have one of the stronger portal classes. And while a whole bunch of new guys on the team, of course, Tamar Bates is coming back with plenty of experience, ultimately the Tigers are 6th out of 16 teams in Division I minutes in the SEC for this upcoming season. So basically, Missouri is easily in the top half of the conference in terms of experience coming in. Now it's just all a matter of how these new guys all come together. Hopefully it's a lot more like Dennis Gates' first season than season 2, to say the least. But speaking of Missouri basketball, I got to say, this is something, I have a scorching hot take for Missouri basketball here that arguably I should have led with, but there's a reason I'm not leading with it. It's because I don't want this to go viral. I don't want this to be aggregated. I want to kind of keep it on the down low a little bit. This is a take for all of you everydayers out there. So you know what? Just hang with me here on the other side of this break. First, though, let's talk some FanDuel, because this time of year, the sports calendar does start thinning out a little bit. I have to admit it. I hate to admit it, but over at FanDuel, here's the good news. They're hooking me up all the time and all their customers with a boost or a bonus this summer daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long over at FanDuel. And you know what? Of course, UFC 304 is tonight. If you're a fight fan, as I am, of course, the main event in Manchester, Paddy the Baddy Pimblett against Bobby Green. Basically an even matchup there. Paddy the Baddy minus 104, Green minus 112. Should be a fun night of fighting. UFC 304. Either way, no matter what you're into, baseball, UFC, soccer, head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. It's FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. So if you've made it this far, there's almost no doubt that you're an everydayer. Appreciate you all so much, the most of everyone, of course. So I like to think there's a little bit of a relationship here, some trust. So really, don't aggregate this. Don't post it on the message boards, social media, anything like that. This is just between me and you. And quite honestly, I should probably take this glass of ice water here and pour it over my head just to cool myself down a little bit. But you know what? After the debut of the Marshall Minute over on the Mizzou Hoops Twitter feed a couple days ago, you can find that at Mizzou Hoops over on X.com. Well, the Marshall Minute, literally a minute of Peyton Marshall interviewing his new teammate, Caleb Grill. And yes, Marshall, there's a little bit of an age gap there, 6 years maybe between Caleb Grill and Peyton Marshall. But I couldn't help but notice Peyton Marshall, a very charismatic guy, seems like a great teammate already, putting his arm around Caleb Grill. It seemed like they were vibing, and really the whole team is vibing this offseason. But I was going, man, Peyton Marshall seems like an awesome teammate too. Holy cow. I'm just going to go ahead and say it, folks. Let me pod this up just a little bit because I'm going to whisper here for a second. Guys, I think Peyton Marshall is going to be the next great basketball player at the University of Missouri. Even though I've never seen him actually play a basketball game, I genuinely believe this. Okay, I can start talking normally again now, I think. All right, here we go. Pod it back up. All right, there we go. I rarely touch the mixer, but I had to just for that, because here's the thing. I of course, have plenty of hope and promise for Honor Boateng and everyone else in this Missouri, this ballyhooed recruiting class, but I'll be damned if there just isn't something about this Peyton Marshall kid. More than something, though, really, it's many things. It's a whole bunch of things. First of all, the fact that he's already transformed his body. He's 18 years old. The guy has already lost a tremendous amount of weight, and good weight, by the way. Like just baby fat, that kind of deal. I figured that was going to happen eventually and slowly over time, maybe more like Steve Moore did. But the fact that he's already shown dedication to trimming down and getting in tremendous shape before he's even stepped foot at an actual Missouri practice, how impressive is that? And by the way, even before he had the extra pounds on him, the guy just had an old school back to the basket type of post game that you just don't see anymore. And it wasn't just a bully ball either. The guy has skills. He can finish with both hands around the rim, but also with tremendous physicality as well. That's a beautiful, beautiful combination. But on top of that, the passing as well. You're telling me this guy can pass? Well, even if you think Dennis Gates is maybe prone to some slight hyperbole on occasion, the fact that Gates called Marshall the best passer in his class, in his entire high school class, not just the 6 guys who came to Missouri, but in the country, my goodness, even if that's close to being correct, that's one hell of a statement. Because if you can play with your back to the basket and score and pass, you're virtually unstoppable, especially in college basketball. There's just very few of those types of players. You know, I'm not saying he's Nikola Jokic or anything, but that's the type of skill set that I can play with my back to the basket, I can face the basket, and I can pass. Well, now I can't double team you. What's the answer? That's my main point. So if Marshall is going to be as much of a load in the paint and on the block as I think he is, if he can also be a deft passer out of a double team, there's really no answer to that. So to me, again, the passing, the rare back to the basket game, the fact that he's already shown tremendous dedication to transforming his body. Oh, and he's a great teammate, seemingly already too, and a likable young man. Sure seems like he gets it, right? I mean, wow. Color me impressed. The guy's nearly 7 feet tall as well. Listen, if you think I'm overreacting here, fine. I probably am. But this is genuinely how I feel. And when I'm this confident about somebody, when I have this kind of gut feeling about a player, generally it goes pretty well. I think my history is pretty good here. So, again, this is not something I'm trying to lead the podcast with or get going viral or anything like that because, number one, I don't want to put too much pressure on a true freshman, a guy, again, I haven't even seen play an actual basketball game yet. But I'm just telling you, early on here, just watching Peyton Marshall from afar here, boy, the young man checks a lot of boxes to me, he could be the next great player at the University of Missouri. And for all the talk of playing 5-out basketball, 5 guys standing around the three-point line to clear out the paint for penetration and all that good stuff. Hey, in the NBA in particular, I get it. I totally do. When you have that level of skill, totally get it. I still think that probably, though, 4 out and 1 in is the most realistic path to having a good college basketball team. The problem is, though, finding that one. Zach Edey, obviously at Purdue, was one of those guys. UConn had one of them this past season. Hey, it wasn't a coincidence, in my opinion, that those two teams played for the national championship this past season. So if Missouri may have found their guy, their big man in Peyton Marshall, wow, I think there's a really good shot of it. I really do. So bottom line is, even if I'm wrong here, if I've gone way too far on that take, the bottom line is I am just really, really looking forward to, of course, watching this entire Missouri basketball team coming up, but Peyton Marshall in particular. So, hey, until next time, and thanks for all you everydayers, as always, being a little patient with me. Hope you enjoyed this Saturday program. I'll be back with you on Monday right here on Locked On Mizzou.